Queen Elizabeth left behind more than just a crown. The properties, possessions, and secret agreements she left behind have been the most controversial aspects of the royal family since her death. Only those closest to her can comprehend some of these, while others are documented. Now, Lady Louise Windsor has come forward to assert that Camilla's family believed they ought to take an entirely different course. The anger that followed was immediate. As it happens, the legal ground was prepared. Subscribe now to learn more about the most personal aspects of Elizabeth's legacy and the intense disagreement amongst the people involved in this succession war over who she truly trusted with it. First, what Elizabeth recorded and what she did not say. Queen Elizabeth II was meticulous about most things, but deliberately ambiguous about others. Over the course of 7 decades, those who worked under her remember a woman who understood that contestation is encouraged by accurate documentation. Nonetheless, certain commitments expressed through confidential communication, trust, and the specific terminology of a long-term partnership possess a unique kind of power. Her estate planning demonstrated this two-pronged approach. Even while the legislative restrictions were unbreakable, they were surrounded by a complicated web of property agreements, private intentions, and unofficial understandings that after her death left settled matters unresolved. Lady Louise's claim quickly answers one of those questions. The specific estate she had been given is part of a category of royal property that Elizabeth considered to be genuinely personal, not national or institutional, but her own. What Camilla intended for it, and to whom she communicated that desire, is at the heart of a dispute that her family could not foresee until it had already occurred. 2. Louise moves forward. Those who have seen Lady Louise's development over the last few years have characterized her as someone who behaves deliberately and discreetly takes in information. She has never looked for conflict, but she has also never wavered in her beliefs. She refrained from making the snap choice to assert her legal claim to the estate. It marked the conclusion of a process that had begun long before Elizabeth died and accelerated in the months that followed. She had remained close to her grandmother outside of formal family get-togethers, frequent private visits, and pursuit of shared hobbies away from cameras and the media. This connection is founded on genuine affection for one another rather than the carefully regulated royal intimacy that characterizes many familial ties within the Windsor network. One of the people who learned of Elizabeth's hidden wishes regarding the estate, which she set aside for the things that mattered most to her, was Louise. The assertion was based on this information. The surrounding documentation influenced its architecture. Third place goes to Camilla's family, the Fury explained. The Parker Bowl family responded to Louise's claim quickly and passionately, not because they didn't understand the legal issue, but rather because they knew it all too well. An inheritance they had been given reason to anticipate was now being legally contested by a young woman whose calm exterior seemed to conceal a determined interior. People who were familiar with the family's response described private conversations that were marked by a combination of shock and something more elusive, the specific anger that results when an assumption made with sufficient confidence turns into a setback. They had not received a formal pledge of the estate. However, due to their connection to Camille's position as queen, they had been given the notion that they were near its future. There is now a legal challenge to this idea that cannot be disregarded. Anger was not the driving force for Louise's actions against Camilla's family. According to what her grandma had informed her, she moved. It makes reason to feel angry. It doesn't change the legal landscape. Edward IV and Sophie made the claim. When Louise got there, she wasn't by herself. Her parents, Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, have been characterized by those close to them as being totally dedicated to tactically and emotionally backing their daughter's position. Due to his previous experience using palace mechanisms to settle his own inheritance dispute, Edward has a unique grasp of how these processes operate. Sophie's contribution is the clarity she brings to every circumstance her family encounters, the capacity to discern between what is reasonable and what is practical, the ability to identify the line between accommodation and capitulation, and the ability to ensure that this line is not crossed merely because doing so would momentarily ease tensions. With the same careful attention to detail that they have applied to all of their significant child-related choices, I worked together to construct the foundation for Louis' claim. This family did not act rashly. The family's actions were motivated by readiness. 5. Real estate. The property at the center of this dispute has a special quality that makes some royal estates valuable and irreplaceable. It is more about Elizabeth's most intimate self than it is about her public persona. She retreated there. She felt that the people she invited were the ones she really trusted, therefore she didn't include the folks required by etiquette. Because of the intimate nature of the land, the inheritance dispute seems less like a formal matter and more like a question of who Elizabeth truly believed to be her own. Louise argues that the ownership of the land should be decided by proximity to Elizabeth's genuine self rather than by proximity to institutional power. Her assertion is somewhat supported by documentation and partially by that relational reality. The Queen Consort's family has sufficient royal authority to support their claim to the territory, according to Camilla's family's counter-argument. Both arguments have merit. The legal procedure will determine which has greater weight. 6. It is impossible for King Charles to be impartial. For the second time in recent memory, Charles is caught up in a dispute between his birth family and his married family that he can theoretically influence as king, but is unable to resolve peacefully in reality. Supporting Louise validates the Edinburgh family's claim at Camilla's family's expense. To support the Parker Bowles position, he must ignore what appears to be his mother's stated intentions. Those close to Charles said that he was taking this with the special weight of a man who has spent his entire life mediating between opposing allegiances and has reached his reign to discover that the mediation never ends. The stakes are simply raised. He hasn't stated his stance. He has been reserved in his private correspondence on the matter, acknowledging the complexity of the situation, expressing concern for all sides, and refusing to support any outcome. That self-control might result in a decision that has consequences. 7. What Elizabeth would have wanted. The most accurate answer to this question is that Elizabeth employed specific techniques to communicate her wishes to certain people, and the conflict that is currently occurring is basically a conflict between people whose interests conflict with those who claim to appropriately represent their wishes. The deceased cannot give an explanation. They can only leave behind what they documented and what they thought other people would remember. Those who worked closely with Elizabeth reported that she was deliberately vague about the things she wanted to leave unclear and fastidious about the things that were most important to her. The estate falls under the first category, according to those who are aware of her private correspondence on the matter. There was no space for doubt when she spoke. She simply chose to use the register of trust rather than the register of formal instruction to express her wishes. Louise's argument is predicated on the idea that she was one of the people Elizabeth trusted with that message, and that honoring her grandmother's memory means honoring what was spoken in private, even if doing so leads to conflict with those who expected a different outcome. 8. The bigger family is watching. This dispute is being closely watched, as major inheritance conflicts always generate within the extended royal network, because the outcome will reveal information about how royal property flows across generational and relational lines, and that communication has implications beyond the specific estate under dispute. William is watching. He has formed his own beliefs about the Edinburgh family's place in the greater royal constellation after years of seeing his uncle, aunt, and cousin act with a consistency and dignity that deserves genuine respect. The public is unaware of his personal position on this conflict. It's probably not neutral. The wider family usually processes these moments in a quiet, Windsor-style manner, accumulating small clues that eventually become positions. These jobs will be crucial after the official process is finished, and relationships need to be built around the outcomes. 9. Louise is in the center. Throughout the court proceedings, the family's fury, the institutional complexity, and the public attention associated with the dispute, Lady Louise Windsor has maintained the poise that people who know her immediately recognize as genuine rather than contrived. For her, this is not enjoyable. Because she believes it to be right, she is tolerating it. She is 22 years old. She should be in a stage of life where her career path and interpersonal relationships are more crucial decisions than inheritance disputes with the Queen Consort's family. The fact that she is instead negotiating this specific terrain highlights the unique load that people, especially those who have spent their entire life trying to carry it lightly, bear when they are near monarchy. What she now carries, the claim, the opposition, the knowledge of what her grandmother told her, and the responsibility to defend it, is important for anyone regardless of age. Over the span of 20 years, her parents instilled stability in her, which she carries with her. Elizabeth, who valued consistency highly, would have seen it. 10. The future is determined by inheritance. However, this dispute has already accomplished something that cannot be undone once the legal process is finished. It has shed light on the internal struggles of a royal family, navigating the particular complexity of mixed connections, contested legacies, and the question of who truly belongs to the inner circle of what Elizabeth left behind. That visibility has consequences. The connections between the Edinburgh family and Camilla's family, between Louise and the Parker-Bowl children, and between Charles and the competing allegiances his family structure demands will all be impacted by this matter, regardless of the outcome of the court proceedings. But Louise's claim is grounded in a simpler fact that underlies everything. A grandmother told her granddaughter something. The granddaughter believed her, and when it came time to decide whether to honor that communication or allow the interests of others to come first, she decided to honor it. Regardless of what the courts decide in the end, that decision was already made quietly and firmly in the fashion of someone who learned from the greatest. A young woman, a private estate, a grandmother's stated wish in opposition to the expectations of a wealthy family, and an illegal process that will determine not just who owns the land, but also the kind of family that results from the conflict it has produced. Louise wasn't looking for a battle. She went because she believed her grandmother's words were worth defending. Enroll now. Please share this with someone who doesn't know what quiet people are capable of when they are fighting for something true by leaving a comment below. Elizabeth made a decision on who she trusted. Louise is proving why she was a good pick.